that we are finishing this supplement, this extension of the principles of A Course in Miracles. The segment we're doing in this session has to do with money. The question, and notice the title, it's a question of payment. Should money be involved in this form of psychotherapy that we're talking about here? And as you might expect, it will be a very nuanced answer that depends on a number of different factors that we'll explore. So welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica. Our reader today is Heather C. Before we get into the new material, though, I did promise you those 4 steps that were outlined in previous. That I've combined 2 of them into 1 step, but I'll point out they're really in the material was written for 4 steps. And so this is a universal. What is this? First of all, the first principle in A Course in Miracles is there's no order of difficulty in any miracles. No one miracle is more difficult than the other, according to the Holy Spirit. But we know, of course, the ego perceives things as being really difficult and other things as being really easy. So here it says there's no order of difficulty. And the question is, how do you get to that understanding and that there is no order of difficulty? And here's how you do it in 4 steps. First, you, the person helping, has to stop judgment. In the instant that the therapist forgets to judge the patient, that's in that instant healing occurs. Only then can it be understood that there's no order of difficulty in healing. But there's a logic to get to that no order of difficulty in healing. And then the next step comes in is you have to recognize what is true. Our minds, our most holy minds, are all joined. All these things are not things the ego would approve of course. But in creation, our minds are joined. They come from the same source. They are the same essence. And then the second part of that, which I've combined into the same, is since they're joined, they're all equal. There's not a hierarchy. So there's really 2 segments in there. That's how I went from 4 down to 3. And therefore, minds that are all joined and there's no inequalities anywhere in between those minds, then it follows naturally that the illusions that appear in the mind, no illusion is any bigger than any other illusion. They are all simply illusions. And therefore, the miracle has no difficulty clearing the mind of one illusion than it does of another. And thus we get around to the first principle, that there is no order of difficulty in miracles. But I have a corollary, which I didn't make up, but I'm adding here, and I didn't get a chance to put it in the notes. While the miracle is equally powerful to overcome any illusion, it still resides in the individual to whether or not they're willing to let go of their illusions. So we're not saying the power will smother an individual's illusions and clear his mind magically. The individual still must be willing to receive the gift of healing in order for the miracle to occur. So these first three principles are the principles by which miracles can occur. And then the one that's unstated here is if the individual is ready and willing to receive them. And if you read the previous section, this is just a re-summarizing of the statements that were in the previous section. I can't take credit for any of this. Noel?
I think the willingness was your original fourth. And I remember that last time we all had questions about what would be appropriate to say, how to respond. Well, that based on listening to the degree of willingness of the person, I would ask Holy Spirit to tell me what to say and how to say it.
Exactly. Exactly. And that reinforces the principle, Noel, that we've read earlier in here is therapist really doesn't know what to say. There's not a formula that therapist has, whenever I'm presented with a person with this concern, here's the thing that should be said. It's not a formula. And the notion that we can predetermine or that the right message would emerge from our little self is in itself an ego trap. Heather?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Norella was talking about her experience with that woman. The first thought that came to me was she just wasn't ready. She needed a little more time. And so that's just exactly what you're talking about now. It's the readiness. And for something in her end, probably she needed a little more time or whatever she needed. But the Holy Spirit is so precise in knowing when someone is ready. So I just love that you shared that, Noel, that, it looked like, maybe you were out of step. No. The readiness probably wasn't there. And then once it was, it all just happened naturally. It's just such a beautiful example of that. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Heather. David?
I just wanted to share my experience yesterday with your 3 steps, Jonica, that judgment stops, recognize minds are joined, and no order of difficulty in healing. I'd been trying to put drapery tracks up for 4 hours and my hands were bleeding and I was beating myself up that I couldn't do it. And I went into an Ace Hardware store and a 20-year-old with a black and white mohawk came up and he said, I was telling him how terrible I was at this. He said, "Why are you beating yourself up, brother? You don't need to do that here. I'm here to help. I will always be there to help you." Those followed your 3 steps. The therapist tells the patient his sins are all forgiven. And the true aim of therapy is passing of my guilt. Within 5 seconds, I felt lighter than air. I knew because of my work in the course that we were healed, this guy. And I thought, that's so inspiring that I can do that too. The next time I see somebody struggling with something, I can give the same approach, those 3 steps. Thank you.
Thank you. So remember, next time you see somebody with a mohawk, be ready for your healing. All right. Thank you, David. That really is a powerful message. I don't mean to make light of it in any way here. We'll move on to the question of payment. So let's say David feels healed and he reaches in his wallet and wants to hand the guy with the mohawk money for helping him. Is this what would the Course in Miracles say about such things? Heather?
The question of payment. No one can pay for therapy, for healing is of God, and he asks for nothing. It is, however, part of his plan that everything in this world be used by the Holy Spirit to help in carrying out the plan. Even an advanced therapist has some earthly needs while he is here. Should he need money, it will be given him, not in payment, but to help him better serve the plan.
Heather, a little slower, please.
Okay. Money is not evil. It is nothing. But no one here can live with no illusions. for he must yet strive to have the last illusion be accepted by everyone everywhere. He has a mighty part in this one purpose, for which he came. He stays here, but for this, and while he stays, he will be given what he needs to stay.
Mhm. So after reading this section, you're going to get a sense that there's no one universal rule, that life has a wide variety of situations. And the question then becomes what's appropriate to the situation. In general, since healing is of God, why should there be any payment for healing in the general sense, such as next time you go to Ace Hardware with your needs? There's no requirement for payment. However, a person operating as a professional therapist does have earthly needs while he is here. This can translate into need for money. Should he need money? And here's where the therapist is asked to trust in source that the money will be given him in whatever form is needed. Here it says, given him not in payment, but to help him better serve the plan. And so the rightful attitude of a person serving to heal with God is to trust that things will be provided and that your essential needs will be taken care of, and not become, I'm sorry, I was about to say money hungry, not to become over focused on the role of money. David?
I just wanted to share that first thing this morning, I called the manager there and said that that was the best customer service I'd ever had in my life. And this guy was incredible. So I that's what the Holy Spirit told me to do.
You know, David, that's perfect because that's a way of honoring the individual. I'm sure that made a difference. The manager noticed because he doesn't get a lot of phone calls praising his employees there. And that later on, we'll look at the difference between giving back but without monetary compensation. And so what David did is gave what is perhaps even more important than monetary compensation. He honored the person's contribution. Okay, so, and then should not go on without recognizing this line that money is not evil. It's nothing. You know, the way you look at it is, what does $100 mean to the Holy Spirit? $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, whatever number you want to insert. What does that mean to the Holy Spirit? It means nothing. But at the same time, we recognize you have to put food on the table. If you're raising kids, they have needs. But we recognize that this is not the basis for reality. These are the transactions we have within a temporary time-space situation. All right. And so if that was multifaceted, I think you'll find all the remainder of what we read in this session is as well.
Only an unhealed healer would try to heal for money, and he will not succeed to the extent to which he values it, nor will he find his healing in the process. There will be those of whom the Holy Spirit asks some payments for his purpose. There will be those from whom he does not ask. It should not be the therapist who makes these decisions. There is a difference between payment and cost. To give money where God's plan allots it has no cost. To withhold it from where it rightfully belongs has enormous cost. The therapist who would do this loses the name of healer, for he could never understand what healing is. He cannot give it, and so he does not have it.
You know, this is an entire, first of all, I want to acknowledge that in the Western world, we have a monetary ethic around professional services. We have a norm of what's expected. Someone who's in a professional role spends an hour with you. There is a norm around compensation. Those are all every culture and every civilization develops its own norms around these things. So these are not sacred. They are just part of the way the society is structured. And what's being suggested here seems almost, it's a different ethic. Those with whom the Holy Spirit asks some payment, and there will be those the Holy Spirit does not ask. It's almost, let's see, how is it phrased? Pay me whatever you can pay me. If it would be a donation basis. That's what it would be. It would be a donation basis rather than and the idea is it should not be the therapist who makes these decisions on payment. So obviously that goes very different than the Western model for compensation of any professional services. We're just pointing out that distinction because remember the context here, we're talking about someone who is healing with the guidance of God, not healing to try to heal for money, for he will not succeed to the extent to which he values the money. Heather?
I hope this is appropriate to share because it happened in my practice. I'll never forget this. I had hired a new receptionist and she was new. And when I came out with a patient, I just said to her, there's no charge for today. So for this person. And so then later she came in and she said, you're not running a charity here. You can't just treat people for free. And I said, I was really shocked, first of all. And then I said, you know what? You need to understand this is first a ministry, second a business, and third a charity if need be. And if you don't like that, you can't work here. And she was really stunned. And from then on, she was a completely different person. She just completely, saw the whole idea of what we were doing there. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. First-hand account. Noelle?
That's fantastic, Heather. Last paragraph. It seems like the first two sentences apply to the healee, and then he applies it to the therapist. So that totally confused me.
Yeah, let's unpack it then, because there's two thoughts that are going here. In addition to who are we talking about, which role, there's also this difference between payment and cost. And so let me illustrate the way cost is being used. David made a phone call to the hardware store to acknowledge how helpful the individual was. What did that cost him? it didn't cost him anything. It differs from a payment. And so to to and part of it is in attitude that one has towards whatever is being, however you reciprocate if you choose to give money where God has plan has allotted it has no cost. And I think Heather's story illustrates, you'd have to read into it a little bit, but she said there's no charge for this. She didn't feel at a loss as a result of that. She was giving there because in that instance it was appropriate to. It has no cost to give money where God's plan allots it, but to withhold money from where it belongs has enormous costs. So that might be when there may be instances where an exchange of money is entirely appropriate, and then to withhold it and not make a payment would make a statement about the person not paying. And so now let's try to break apart these roles. The therapist who would do this loses the name of the healer because I think because he's demanding payment, for you would never understand what healing is. So I'm not sure, Noel. Sorry, I don't have any insights on the roles here. There's nothing I have to offer.
The only thing I can think of is that the third sentence in talking about the therapist is when the therapist becomes a patient, and that's very often required in formal training. The new therapists have to go through their own therapy and analysis.
They do.
Still doesn't really wash.
Lauren, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so my logical mind is having a little trouble because I understand if I'm, a priest or a minister and somebody's coming to me and I'm helping them, from a spiritual perspective, and that, that's not their main source of income, right? But therapists and, go to school for career. So to me, they're not going, I'm not going to study and become a therapist and then not, that's my career, that's my income, that's my sustenance. So I'm just having a little trouble with the concept here. And I don't know if you can help me with that.
Yeah, I agree there is trouble because the laws of the world would say, particularly the Western world, would view that person's time not as a gift from spirit, but as labor to be compensated. So, yes, questioning that does break the logic of the world. And I guess you might ask, Laura, would you expect the Holy Spirit to follow the logic of the world? As a matter of fact, it seems to be like on almost every page, there's a questioning of the logic of the world. And so here as well, but there are practical implications to your questions. What are we to do? When a person, Heather worked 25 years as a therapist, she certainly collected fees there, and so it's a nuanced look at it. And I would say, Lauren, let's wait till we get to the end and see if any of that clears up after we've read the whole section. And then we can come back and say, how can we possibly make this work in the practical world? All right, so a couple hands. Julie.
Thanks, Jonica. I think I've mentioned before that I got introduced to the course, a long time ago, in the late 90s by somebody who was my partner. And frequently, because I was such a young person at the time and immature in a lot of ways, I thought she was nuts. I mean, I loved her and she was great and fascinating and all that. And I thought she was nuts. So when I was exposed to all the ways that she refused to live by scarcity, I had no frame of reference. So, nothing real can be threatened was in our house 6 times a day about this thing or the next thing, and often about resources, about her strong desire to share and be in the flow of sharing resources of all kinds. We even had a situation where, and again, I was really just not equipped to be in the flow for lots of reasons, but we had a situation where there was we needed something done, and she, hired a handy person that I would not have hired for all of my whatever judgmental reasons. And that was just a great example of how she was living in the faith of the course, because she really just lived this whole nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. I mean, it was about time, it was about money, it was about trusting people, it was about just all these things. And so I think, having lived with somebody who was really embodying that all those decades ago, of course, now I see it as my early education in the course, right? But yeah, so it's really cool to be able to have experienced someone who really was a faithful practitioner, and then also over the years to be able to make those choices myself. It's very, it's such a good feeling to be able to do those things quietly, but just to know that I'm coming from a place where the rest of the world would absolutely judge the choice I made about distribution of resources, primarily as, well, you need that. And then whatever other judgments they would pile on. But the more I give, the more I have, period. Period. So thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just wanted to point out a universal law that speaks to this, particularly to Lauren's question. And it says that the mind of the ego cannot possibly understand the mind of the soul. And the mind of the soul cannot possibly understand the mind of the ego. So it looks crazy. One looks crazy to the other. And Julie echoed that in her testimony there, it seemed unreasonable, insane, illogical, because it was totally different thought system from the mind of the ego, from the laws of this world. So and applies here in the case of payments, but it applies all across the board, including the application of forgiveness to somebody who may have really crossed the line, and we're being asked to pray for them and forgive them. It makes no sense in a world that teaches an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So yes, you can count on that discontinuity appearing again and again. David?
In one of our previous readings, I can't remember if it was last night or the night before, it starts out saying, who is the patient and who is the therapist? And it answers it later. It says, everyone is the patient and the therapist. And I was thinking about it today. the whole world is. We walk outside and we're all patients and therapists to each other. It's really a revolutionary way of looking at psychotherapy and healing. Both the patient and the therapist experience healing when they join their minds together, which is number two in your thing, in a relationship where Christ can enter, because they both experience their joint innocence by recognizing the Christ in each. So I just love that idea.
Mhm.
Like,
Thank you, David. Yeah, and thank you for that reminder, because without that joining, the Holy Spirit says there is no healing without that joining. So let's look at it now. We're going to go on just a minute. Let's say you go to a professional counselor once a week for 4 weeks and sit in there for an hour, and there is no spiritual healing, but yet you're supposed to pay $250 an hour for your time there. So we can look at this through a different lens now, where maybe that therapist doesn't even understand the principles of healing. And so I don't want to draw any final conclusions here. This is really meant for you to draw your own conclusions. But I think you admit that there are many more questions that typically are never asked in our society, that the Holy Spirit invites us to look at these things again and to choose again. Heather, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the most important line on that last slide was that it should not be the therapist who makes this decision. That's was everything to me. You know, is this a business decision, or is this a ministry decision, or is this a charity decision? That was not up to me. That would come to me if there was something that was really, there was a need that needed to be met, that in the course of what the patient was disclosing, I knew they didn't have the money or whatever it was. So I just want to say it really was not up to me to make that decision. It would be unusual that I would do that, but if it was dictated, I mean, it became clear that that was the right thing to do, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think just for the benefit of others, Heather decided early on she was going to use these principles in her practice and maintain true to that. I will tell you, though, that as a result, her practice did not look like many of the other people who have more rigid terms for their time. Her practice had a lot more asking the Holy Spirit what would be appropriate in this situation. Noel?
One last thing about my friend's visit today, talking about David reminding us about everyone as the therapist. As we were sitting there, she was holding a little book, and I had seen her with that book before. And I asked what it was. She said, "It's a prayer book. I carry it everywhere, and I just look at it every so often." And it was in Spanish, and she translated it for me. And the title is Love Letters from Your King. And then she read some of a passage on one of the pages. And it's like, I don't know if you know The Door of Everything. That's one of those spiritual books where also any other Joseph Benner book, God is speaking directly, and he's reassuring us every moment, every page, every sentence. And she read things like, "You are innocent, I love you," and quotations from the Bible as well. And so, like, I was being fed from these. So, look at that reciprocity.
Lovely. It's really nice to hear that it's happening, that it's translating to recognizing that every encounter is, in the Holy Spirit's eyes, a therapeutic encounter. So we mentioned a minute ago, if you sit in there for week after week with a therapist and they don't understand the principles of healing.
The therapists of this world are indeed useless to the world's salvation. They make demands, and so they cannot give. Patients can pay only for the exchange of illusions. This indeed must demand payment, and the cost is great. A bought relationship cannot offer the only gift whereby all healing is accomplished. Forgiveness, the Holy Spirit's only dream, must have no cost. For if it does, it merely crucifies God's Son again. Can this be how he is forgiven? Can this be how the dream of sin will end?
So, in the eyes of the Holy Spirit, the purpose of therapy is to heal someone of their illusions and send them on their way to God. But if the therapist is limited to the laws of this world, then they don't understand those laws of healing, and therefore they must demand payment, and the cost is great in that, and many people who've been in this class will say, I went for years and years and years and years and years to a therapist, but I didn't get a real fundamental change. So the cost is great in that one is using time and money, but not getting healing. They refer to it here as a bought relationship that doesn't offer true healing. For true healing involves the Holy Spirit's forgiveness, which is to let go of one's illusions of oneself, the dream of a self that lacks, the dream of an ego self. And that has no cost. And so now we have an entirely different view. It still will circle back at the end, Lauren, to the question, well, then what about professionals that work in a field, like all the case managers and nurses and people that provide help? What about them? And really, I think it was addressed early on, is that if they're willing to work with God, their needs will be met. But as Heather pointed out, it's not up to the therapist to decide these things. Heather?
The right to live is something no one need fight for. It is promised him and guaranteed by God. Therefore, it is a right the therapist and patient share alike. If their relationship is to be holy, whatever one needs is given by the other. Whatever one lacks, the other supplies. Herein is the relationship made holy, for herein both are healed. The therapist repays the patient in gratitude, as does the patient repay him. There is no cost to either, but thanks are due to both, for the release from long imprisonment and doubt. Who would not be grateful for such a gift? Yet who could possibly imagine that it could be bought?
I can't help but thinking of a certain type of therapist who's in practice charges $300 to $400 an hour, has all his degrees, and feels like there's nothing their patients can offer him. He's there to offer help to them. And this would be what we call according to the laws of this world. And but in contrast, according to the laws of healing of the Holy Spirit, um, the patient and the therapist are equals, and they both have much to learn from each other for a holy relationship, which is the goal of all healing, the goal of all therapy. A holy relationship is a process of exchanging, giving, and receiving. Here it talks about exchanging gratitude. The therapist pays the patient in gratitude. The patient repays the therapist in gratitude and honor. You honor the soul of another. Um, and that type of holy relationship, who could possibly imagine that you could buy it? And so maybe we're talking about an entirely different, I'll use the word service. If we assume that the therapist is offering a service of some sort to the patient, maybe the service that is offered through the Holy Spirit being a holy relationship where there is no judgment and they see each other as equals, part of one mind, where maybe that's an entirely different kind of service. And payment for such a service is a very different matter. Oops. You all be careful now with your private messages. Okay, we'll go on.
It has well been said that to him who hath shall be given. Because he has, he can give. And because he gives, he shall be given. This is the law of God, and not of the world. So it is with God's healers. They give because they have heard his word and understood it. All that they need will thus be given them. But they will lose this understanding unless they remember that all they have comes only from God. If they believe they need anything from a brother, they will recognize him as a brother no longer. And if they do this, a light goes out even in heaven. Where God's Son turns against himself, he can look only upon darkness. He has himself denied the light and cannot see.
So indeed, there are two different types of service that are being offered. In the Holy Spirit sponsored service, the therapist gives, because he gives, he shall be given. This is the law of God. But Lauren, it is not the law of this world. And I think in most instances, people who follow the law of the world, well, Julie testified to it, and so did Heather. People that are assuming the laws of this world should be followed would view someone that's following the laws of God as being quite crazy, as giving it away. They would really question the soundness of those practices. And so that dichotomy there is one that we have to learn to navigate. And if you're not in that field professionally, then you're not confronted with this. But I've seen many examples of people who just have little things they do on the side. And let's see, I'll share a story. Someone who had a certain skill was retired and does it on the side for money. And when I had a person that needed help who is not in a financial position to be able to pay for services, I approached the service provider wondering if they would do it if for free, pro bono. They looked at me like I was crazy. Told me, don't ever suggest that again. So there really are two different, I'll try to be non-judgment, two different business practices, two different ethical standards. And in terms of A Course in Miracles, this can be framed as the universal principle of giving and receiving upon which the entire course is based. And so I would say it takes a degree of spiritual insight to be able to appreciate that to be of service and giving to others is where you find your true self and where you multiply the gifts of the world. That's a spiritual insight, and we should just recognize that not everyone shares that, and initially, and they may take quite a bit of convincing to bring them around to that. So you all know this to be true already.
One rule should always be observed. No one should be turned away because he cannot pay. Yes. No one is sent by accident to anyone. Relationships are always purposeful. Whatever their purpose may have been before the Holy Spirit entered them, they are always his potential temple, the resting place of Christ and home of God himself. Whoever comes has been sent. Perhaps he was sent to give his brother the money he needed. Both will be blessed thereby. Perhaps he was sent to teach the therapist how much he needs forgiveness and how valueless is money in comparison. Again, will both be blessed. Only in terms of cost could one have more. In sharing, everyone must gain a blessing without cost.
So I just felt inspired to share something that I follow on social media. There's an individual that has a ministry. He goes to a restaurant, maybe it's a pizza parlor or a hamburger place, and where they serve lunches, takeout, and he orders 50 lunches. And the owners frequently question, why so much food? And he says, I'm going to give it away to the homeless. And they're filming while they do that. And so then they it's a pretty big order for a restaurant, 50 lunches. And invariably, when the lunches are ready and he hands the money over to the owner says no charge. And he's got like 100 of these videos where the restaurant gave, or else there was a customer. The other day I saw one, a customer was sitting at the counter and he says, I want to pay the bill. And these people that just come forward in the spirit of giving to those who are hungry, and it's just a way of honoring that. And so no one is sent away by accident. No one is turned away because he cannot pay. It reminded me of that. And this guy just serves as a conduit. He does this a lot. And he just serves as the broker, if you will, between the restaurant and he doesn't bring the homeless into the restaurant. He takes it down to where they're living and distributes free food. And then the video continues on to when he's distributing the food. And a lot of times the restaurant manager would say, "Can I go with you?" And is there in the distributing of the food. So it just, no one is sent by accident to anyone. Relationships are always purposeful. They are always a potential for the Holy Spirit to enter in. Atisha?
Yes, I am so grateful that we're having this, that we're reading this and having this conversation, because something's happened recently, and this class tonight is just giving me so much clarity. I had an appointment to volunteer at a place. I had that appointment Friday, and I sat in the car. I was there 5 minutes early, and I prayed, Holy Spirit, whatever you would have done with this, with my involvement with this organization. So I go in, and the interview with the director, first of all, it was supposed to be with someone else, and that person was sick. So I ended up interviewing with the director who I've met before years ago. And it immediately became a holy instant in our conversation. It was not an interview. It was this free-flowing, interesting conversation, which ended up us brainstorming this incredible way that I could be involved in this organization. She was so excited, both of us were. And she sent me away to say, when you go home, you have to write all of this up, and I will try to get us a grant. I'm going to apply for a grant for this. And you just write in how much you want to be paid. And I've been excited all weekend long. She even said something like, this could be a new career for you one day, who knows, which I'm unhappy in my work and I'm desperate for a new career. But this conversation and this reading is helping me to see that my intention there was to volunteer. And I have a good job. I wouldn't need to replace whatever sort of ministry or spiritual blessing I would be getting. I wouldn't need I don't need it to live. And so this is just giving me so much clarity that I need to just stay in the intention of the way I wanted to be involved in the first place. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Atisha. There's a lot of smiling faces on the video camera here. So there's a point that both dovetails with Atisha's story and also a very subtle principle here that contrast payment with cost. And remember, cost in this context is the person that thinks they have very, very little time, very little energy, and feels as though the hour they spend with the other person is going to cost them. That they really don't have the time for them, and there's a price they have to pay for that time. And so Atisha was looking to volunteer her time, to give of herself. She wasn't counting the cost to herself. She was giving her skills and abilities away. And so in sharing, everyone must gain a blessing without a cost. It's an attitude that okay, I get it. It's an ego attitude of what's this going to cost me that interferes as an obstacle to giving. An ego asks, what is this going to cost me? Whereas a spirit-led soul says, how can I be helpful? Is there something I can give here? It's a both can approach the very same situation, but from an entirely different perceptual viewpoint. One from giving, the other from losing. Noel?
Just before you said that, I thought the word cost and what it means in English is an ego-laden word.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a really partners up with sacrifice. I'm going to sacrifice my hour here, so I'm going to need some money in return. And it's a perception, and all of that is, again, in the Western world and in the professional world is held to be the norm, but it interferes with the idea of living an abundant life and being blessed to be able to give to others. And that's where Atisha's story, she was giving out of abundance and then realized there was so much more that could come back. Whether or not she chooses to take that is another matter, but it just shows you that there's a world of abundance out there. Yeah, and there's many examples of that.
This view of payment may well seem impractical, and in the eyes of the world it would be so. Yet not one worldly thought is really practical. How much is gained by striving for illusions? How much is lost by throwing God away? And is it possible to do so? Surely it is impractical to strive for nothing and to attempt to do what is impossible. Then stop a while, long enough to think of this. You have perhaps been seeking for salvation without recognizing where to look. Whoever asks your help can show you where. What greater gift than this could you be given? What greater gift is there that you would give?
Mm-hmm. So I would really think myself so clever if I could bring this full circle back to Lauren's question about the practical application of these principles. And a course teaches that the world is itself not practical. It's based or premised upon a complex set of illusions that it would have you believe that are worth striving for and giving your life to. Not very practical. How much can you possibly gain by striving for illusions and throwing God away? And so the advice here is to pause and ask yourself what I believe to be the existential question. What is it that you really want from your life in this world? What is it that really matters to you? For that is worth striving for, but perhaps the other thing's not. And the Holy Spirit then suggests that what you really are looking for is contained in the holy relationship, where you, one, stop judging, two, recognize that you are one mind and perfectly equal with the other person, and three, recognize your gratitude for their soul coming into your life. So whoever asks you for help can show you where you will find your salvation. It's in the encounter with the person standing in front of you. Oddly enough, it's actually that simple. Lauren?
Yeah, thank you so much because, I think if you layer on the fact that, all of my, logic is trying to make sense of this, and you kind of take that and you say, throw that out because it's really not, it's not following the Holy Spirit and the Course and what it's saying. So all of that stuff that, I think, well, that the world doesn't work like that. Once I just get rid of that, I get it. I get it. And it's sort of, it's like, because you could say that really about anything. You could say that about doctors healing people physically, right? And it's all based on the parameters of living, in the body on this earth, which isn't what this is talking about. So thank you. I learned a lot.
Yeah, and Lauren, actually what you just summarized there so beautifully is the essence of what is called the undoing of the illusion, is just take all those worldly set of assumptions, throw them out and start over from a blank slate. But now let the Holy Spirit's principles fill them, because we trust Holy Spirit's guidance is loving and leads us forward. That really is the essence of this course. Turns out people have a lot more trouble just throwing out all those principles for so many reasons. But that really is the plan here, to exchange the principles of the world for the principles of the Holy Spirit. David?
I was just thinking, Rand, and really the benefits instead of money are the growth in your soul. And those benefits, there's other revelations that talk about laying up your credits in heaven, and they last for eternity. So it's a good investment.
It is. And that's, thank you, David. And that's the, brings us back to this. Stop a while, long enough to think of this. You have perhaps been seeking for salvation without knowing where to look. It's the benefits to your soul that David was just speaking about, is what's going to make you happy, come to recognize the truth about yourself, and enable you to be effective in loving relationships with others. Now, maybe there's other things on your want list, but I would say happiness and knowing the truth about yourself and being effective in loving relationships with others ought to be right at the top of your list. And so yes, the benefits accrue to your soul, and they can be felt immediate. That they can be felt, but in practicing this course, it's a lot of Christian theology taught that you'll be miserable here on earth, but you'll be rewarded in heaven. It's you have to suffer through the pains of the world, but all is going to be so good after you arrive in heaven. Well, the Course teaches is that happiness is a gift intended for here and now. And when those benefits start accruing to your soul, that will be a personal experience of your own. You will know it to be true because it's your soul and your experience and your awareness of that. You will pay attention to how that feels. Heather?
Physician, healer, therapist, teacher, heal thyself. Many will come to you carrying the gift of healing if you so elect. The Holy Spirit never refuses an invitation to enter and abide with you. He will give you endless opportunities to open the door to your salvation, for such is his function. He will also tell you exactly what your function is in every circumstance and at all times. Whoever he sends you will reach you, holding out his hand to his friend. Let the Christ in you bid him welcome, for that same Christ is in him as well. Deny him entrance, and you have denied the Christ in you. Remember the sorrowful story of the world and the glad tidings of salvation. Remember the plan of God for the restoration of joy and peace. And do not forget how very simple are the ways of God. You were lost in the darkness of the world until you asked for light, and then God sent his Son to give it to you.
So we've contrasted these two different approaches, one using the laws of the world and the norms for financial compensation that the world has made the norm, comes to expect. And the other is a contrasting system that is centered on principles of healing as taught by the Holy Spirit and causes us to question the norms of the world and rely on the Holy Spirit for having the answers and knowing what's best for a person. And in that encounter, all judgments are asked to be laid aside. And all that is asked is the recognition that you join your higher minds together in the recognition of perfect equality. And this is the foundation for healing to happen, for this is the entryway into the holy encounter. And in that environment, there's no order of difficulty in miracles. No one illusion stands any greater than any other illusion, for it is enshrouded by what talks here about the Holy Spirit will enter in. She never refuses an invitation to enter and abide with you, that the door is open and Holy Spirit will tell you exactly what your function is in every circumstances and at all times. It's about inner guidance. We often use that prayer from workbook lesson 70. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say and to whom? Holy Spirit will tell you exactly what to do in every circumstance and at all times. And what I really get out of this is potentially every encounter you have has the seeds for these possibilities. It's not to say that they will always blossom and be like we've heard several testimonies here in this session of holy encounters with other people. It's not to say that will happen every single time, because the other person has to be ready and you have to be ready as well. And so, just in conclusion, our part is to be ready for a miracle to happen and to view each encounter as pregnant with the possibilities of a holy encounter. And if it happens, great, celebrate it. And if it doesn't, we don't judge it. We move on without feeling like there was something wrong with us. And so I want to thank you all for your sharing and for all your giving. These sessions are more rich because of them. I am looking forward to doing this material again when the right time comes, which may be in about a year or so from now. So that would be early 2026, late 2025. We'll see. But that's as far as we're going to go tonight. I did want to mention that we're going to be reading from the Manual for Teachers over the next month or two throughout the holidays. And so I hope that you and they lend themselves, because it's a series of 28 different questions that are not sequentially married, so that you can jump in and out almost anywhere and get a lot out of it. And I think that fits well. People's may have holiday schedules that make it difficult for them to attend regularly. And so I try to do this during the holidays and do the Manual for Teachers for that reason. And hope that you can join us. Heather, thank you for reading. Thank you all for your contributions.
So the Manual for Teachers follows beautifully from this.
It really does, Noel. It was totally by accident or seemingly serendipitous, but seems profoundly to fit. So you know who to thank for that. All right. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Yannick.
you so
and
much.
everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks,
Good
Heather.
night,
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Monica.
Jonathan. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Heather.
Good night, all.
Heather for reading.